today, Soapy Muffins, and I'm joined by the returning, my wonderful co-host. He's been gone for a week, and he's back, Dave Oster.
Hey, everybody.
Dave, how you doing on this this wonderful Monday that we don't got no basketball?
Let me just answer that real quick for you. We're just gonna. Yep, that's how I'm doing.
Oh, we love to have you back, Dave. We've missed you. And you missed some absolute gems on the podcast.
Oh, I did not miss a thing because all of our videos are uploaded on YouTube, and I'll watch them after the fact.
Yeah,
I got to enjoy with you guys after the fact, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we're not here to dwell on the past. We're here to talk about the failure of Jake's team. But before we get into that,
you're not holding up. You're just going right at him, aren't you?
Yep, going right at it. Yep. But before we do that, and before I get to make fun of Ben Simmons even more, we got to get through some housekeeping. If you guys would like to join us in Discord, go to the description box below. There you can join the conversation about how basically Sixers fans have become the punching bag. Obviously, it's basically just been because of everything with Ben and the fact they lost. But once again, if you don't want to just bash on 76ers fans, you could talk about the draft that's coming up. The lottery's tomorrow. So I get to find out if I got to move to my nearest bridge near me.
No. You will have JG4 as the number 2 overall pick. I believe in you, Soapy Muffin.
I mean, hey, but there is the chance. But also as well, if you don't want to just talk about basketball, we got football. There's been football news coming up. The season's coming up. So, that's going to be popping off. We got sports betting if you want to bet. If you want to talk about that. If you want to talk about, even nerdy stuff like gaming, TV shows, movies, things like that.
Or, dare I say, baseball, which I've become an expert on over the last week.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of baseball. Turns out when you're trying to, be on a family vacation and TV's on and kids are around, what's the one thing that you can watch so you don't got to worry about kids seeing? Baseball. Everybody loves baseball. I mean,
hey.
Just watching lots of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, if it distracts you long enough to not be bothered by children, there you go. But
turns out if you're X percentage drunk, baseball can be an entertaining game. It's a very long one, but you know what? I had fun. I watched 7 games of baseball over the last 5 days or so. So I mean, that's pretty good count. Yeah. More baseball than I watched in the last year.
I mean, that's more baseball than I think I've ever watched, so... yeah. But, as moving on to the other part of the housekeeping, if you would like to support us at a monetary value, you can go to patreon.com/MVPvids. There you can join us at any of the 4 tiers that we have. Bronze, you can join voice chat. Silver, so you can vote on Wet Boys. Gold, you can see videos ahead of time, because I believe, and Ricky, obviously you can correct me, is the Io DeSumo prospect breakdown come out yet? Because if not... You get that ahead of time. There's also another one on the way. I won't spoil who. I'm pretty sure Ricky probably has said it out loud before, but it's a mystery. And if you want to get shouted out before videos, you could be a platinum sponsor, just like our wonderful sponsor, Pat Hill. We love you, Pat. Even though you made fun of me in the Discord last night. But that's the last little bit of housekeeping. So let's move into it. Dave, Ben Simmons is soft as baby shit, my boy. We love to see it. And man,
do we?
I mean, we're not slowly sneak into this, Dave. We're gonna bash this boy. The fact that this man is as soft as baby shit, he's a mental midget, as it was said earlier by an NBA executive.
Anonymous executive. What a fucking coward.
Yeah. Basically, that's probably the most roundabout way of saying of like, oh, this guy who probably is maybe involved with the organization somehow probably wanted to say that.
Might be local to the 76ers said that. Yep.
Yeah. Basically, what we had, I don't have my face cam on because obviously I'm in a room that has very bad lighting in it, but you guys can't see.
This lighting makes me look good, Soapy? My skin color is the same as the wall. I look like I'm in a prison.
Well, yeah, you look like you're in a prison. I look like I'm sitting in a fucking piss cube when I'm in my room, so how do you think I feel?
I'm so glad I did not drink before that. But yeah, I understand. The lighting in the game is... We can't all be Ricky Widmer in our exclusive studio setups with our bookcase behind the actual items on it, Sorry. One day we'll get there.
Yeah. basically the fact that, you can't see it. I'm running my victory lap. On Friday, I basically talked about the fact that Ben Simmons was fucking overpay. He's a bum. Not a bust, but just a bum. Not even the best player from his own draft. And would you lo and behold, I'm looking like I'm right.
Okay.
I'm looking like the fact.
It looks like happened? The fact. What happened in that game? Just for those in the audience who did not watch Game 7 of the Hawks Sixers, what happened, Soapy?
90% of the time, Ben Simmons, a guy who's 6'10", is passing the ball when he's wide open underneath the paint. Smaller Matisse Thybulle.
Double covered.
Yep. And the fact that half the time I'm just looking at it and I'm like, man, this series MVP is Ben Simmons, because he really did just help the Hawks move to the conference finals.
Ooh.
Yeah. But basically it's the fact of, going into this game, the fact of, on Friday I had basically bashed Ben Simmons, say the fact that if you think Rudy Gobert's an overpay, Ben Simmons is right up there in that conversation. He doesn't fucking do anything. But, and going into this, obviously, I almost had that, okay, I have a bit of karma with me. Every time I bash a player, they turn out to be really fucking good.
Yep.
So I had that fear of, I would shit on Ben and he dropped, 40. And I was like, I don't want that. Obviously, when I saw Ben just passing the ball, I'm like, oh, I'm safe.
Yeah. Don't worry. If you think Ben's ever going to drop 40, you're safe, Soapy. He will never take that many shots because he's afraid of taking free throws. He's afraid of being fouled. He's afraid of having to have pressure on him. It was incredibly disheartening to see what happened on the court, and I think the most telling sign was the post-game interview and having him just openly admit that, that cut the legs out from under the team. That moment in the game, Game 7, the deciding game, when Ben passed up on a free dunk and free throw to pass to a double-covered Matisse Thybulle, as you had mentioned, it took the wind out of their sails. I mean, how are you supposed to win when your second best player, your defensive, all-NBA defensive player, I think he and Matisse Thybulle are both all-NBA defensive teams, all of these accolades. There's 3 people on the
Sixers who all made that team.
Yeah, all of these accolades. And he can't get done. I mean, he had a stat line that looked like a broke-ass Draymond Green. That is not a man you want to pay $30 million to. And I think that obviously there's something going on. It's bad because it's the Sixers, but all the stories, all the narratives about what happened to Markelle Fultz's shot and where did it go, what happened to him, and we find out eventually what had happened with his injury, and you can't blame him. Part of it still people want to blame on the mental game. Part of it, obviously, there's a medical issue. Ben Simmons has no medical issue. Ben Simmons is a freak of nature athletically. It's all mental. It's 112% mental issue with Ben Simmons not being someone who is willing to take a shot. I don't understand why, though.
Yeah, and I just look at it and I just see the fact of, I almost wondering, because obviously, JCar resident 76ers fan, for a while I was saying, Ben's playing a role on the team. And then also on Friday I had said, so use the number 1 overall pick on a role player. But the fact of, I think it was, they kind of got him into that mentality of, okay, you're here to set people up. And as well, I almost just kind of think looking at it from the perspective of, seeing Ben being way too willing to pass the ball, it almost feels like at times, this team probably told him repeatedly, you are not the focus offensive, they are. Where it's almost like he probably has it ingrained into his mind of, I'm not a primary focus for this offense, the most I do is bring the ball up and give the ball to someone else. Because obviously we've seen their offense all year run through Joe, Tobias, Seth Curry, and just the kind of other perimeter players while Ben just kind of play makes. I almost wonder if this is a point of where they basically got Ben into the mental position of look, we don't need you to score, and he may not be able to get himself out of that sort of rut. And I almost wonder if that's what caused it, of where he couldn't discern what he's been doing all year from what he needs to do.
I mean, that's a fair case to bring up that, the play style of the 76ers does tend to lend itself to running the offense. Ben is the initial creator for others, but then you do have these ball handlers in Best Curry, Toby, and Joe, who are the finishers. They're the guys who get you the buckets at the end of the day. I feel like you have to look further back, though, to get the whole story. This is Ben Simmons, who we looked at LSU, someone who was seen as disinterested, lethargic, just generally carefree at college because it didn't seem like he even wanted to play the game. He was already so far ahead as far as a lock for number 1 overall, incorrectly or correctly, over Brandon Ingram. And a lot of people are looking back at those scouting reports, seeing Ben Simmons' work ethic is in question. Ben Simmons couldn't carry an LSU team to even a top 64 bid to make it to the tourney. It was a bit embarrassing at the time, and now people are being like, shit, was that a sign? Like, is this a guy who is not willing to invest in himself and to put in the work to get there because he doesn't want to be embarrassed on a big stage? And this is a guy who we've made comments of for years, talking about his shooting percentages, his free throw being terrible. Is he shooting with the right hand or the left hand? What is the correct way for him to go about playing offensive basketball? Is he a 1 or is he more of a wing, like a 4-5, like almost a small ball center, who can distribute really well? Like, there's so many questions around his game, and it seems like none of them are new, but nothing's been answered. He's been in the league for years now, and we're still at that point where, Ben, he's still young technically, but we haven't seen the offensive growth out of him. We've seen the summer highlights year over year over year. Ben hitting threes and warm-ups. The fuck is that at? When it's time to play, none of that exists. So it's hit a boiling point, and the NBA, subreddit, I'll just use that as one example because it's an incredibly toxic and very common place to voice your concerns. It's just, I'm sure the city of Philadelphia is not doing him any favors either, but everyone seems to have an opinion about Ben Simmons, and all of them are negative. We respect his defense, but even Doc was like, I don't know if he's a point guard who can win a championship on a team. That is the sign that even the organization perhaps has its doubts.
Yeah, and obviously hearing the we know he has the potential, when is it going to happen? My instant thought process, I'm like, is he the new Andrew Wiggins?
Oh, you take that fucking back.
I'm just saying, it's the same goddamn thing.
Andrew Wiggins is a two-way wing with incredible endurance.
I'm talking about when he was on the Timberwolves and was
still
the same player.
He's an Iron Man out there.
Yeah, basically what I mean by that is how basically we all just looked at Wiggins. Yeah. Basically, for the people at home who may not know, basically with Wiggins, when he was on the Timberwolves, every year we're just Wiggins has this next level he's able to go to. We're going to see it this year. And we didn't. We're like, don't worry. Fine, it's whatever. He's going to do it again next year. He then doesn't improve. We're at the point of and even across the board with Ben, of we see his stats going down year after year. And we just kind of look at it and we're like, what is going on? Everyone keeps hearing, and I'm not saying this to bash anybody in particular when I say that. We hear every year oh, well, Ben's getting so much better. You look at his stats, he's down across the board. Even his assists are a little bit up, but it's okay, what happened to the aggressive Ben we saw his rookie year, of where it was I don't give a shit if you're in front of me, get the hell out of the way. We saw that just disappear. We saw the fact of Ben was gonna Ben would run just sprint down the court when he'd grab a rebound, because it's basically, who the fuck's stopping me at the rim?
Yeah.
We get 2 or 3 years in, and we're not even seeing that Ben anymore. We see oh, I'd rather, rely on my teammates, that are smaller than me, and oh, there's Clint Capella in the paint. I'd fucking, I look at it and I'm like, bro, Ben, you are 6'10". You are a freak athlete. You had incredible finishing ability when you first came into the league. Go to the goddamn rim.
Yeah,
that's it.
I mean, you hear the constant concerns.
I'm a fan of the 76ers.
Yeah.
If I'm the 76, if I'm a 76ers fan, if I'm a Ben Simmons defender, still somehow after all of this, I think I look at this and it's basically like Ben needs a new team. He basically needs to get sent to a team that he's the best goddamn player on, because he's got to fix that shit that Philly broke with him. It's like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, I think Philly's 100% the sole reason he's like this. I think it's mainly just the fact of like, I think they played a massive role in it of making a number 1 overall pick a role player. But the fact of like, go to a team where like he's forced to be the number 1. And if we keep seeing like the lack of motivation, the lack of work ethic, at that point it's just like, okay, cool, Ben's a bust.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's valid to say that a change of scenery could be beneficial to him, but it starts from within. And all of a sudden, we're getting leaked all of this information about Ben Simmons in the past couple of years. Talks about how he chose to work out with his brother instead of working out with like a shot doctor, basically. In the offseason, it's like, well, you could have had a chance to work with somebody who has helped countless amounts of young talent in the NBA work to improve their game, and instead you're like, I'm gonna play with my like D3 fucking brother, who is a point guard, because that's my inner circle and that's who I'm comfortable with. Like, it was a comfortable move for him. You're a 6'10" ball handler. Why can't you play like Giannis? Why can't you play like fucking C-Scam even? Like, where is the drive to attack the basket? You brought it up. When you have that kind of talent, why aren't you using it on the court? And also, is this a case of he's not choosing to use it, or is this a case of coaching? Like you said, is it he was told he is the playmaker for these guys, and he is just you're a defender 1 through 5 for us, and you're a playmaker, but basically don't worry about the scoring part. We'll leave that up to to Toby and Joe and Seth Curry, best Curry out there. Like, it's very hard to make excuses for a guy after this point, because I keep looking back more and more and asking more questions about his play style, and I think it's just him. I think it's an internal decision. I think it's something up here. Ben Simmons decided as himself, this is who he is as a player. It's very frustrating to see that when we see other guys with his traits have great success. And I think the frustration is understandable, because we're watching a player like Giannis, who we talked about ad nauseum, being someone who has all the God-given gifts of, this incredible handling, strength, size, every tool you want, and he's working on his game. His shooting's getting better year over year over year. But the key to his game is that downhill drive. It's that work ethic to be like, I'm gonna fucking go downhill. I don't care if I hit 50%, 60% of my free throws. I will get to the line and I will do me, because at the end of the day, that's what helps my team win. And it's the frustration I've seen Ben be reluctant to be an offensive piece. He is an afterthought. He is a asterisk at the end of the day to this Sixers offense. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch this team be limited, because Ben doesn't have the confidence in his own game, or Doc doesn't push him out of his comfort zone. We watched Brett Brown get basically, crucified for Ben Simmons' unwillingness to grow as a player. Were we too harsh on Brett Brown now? You have to go back and reconsider. It's just so much is brought in question because of Ben Simmons' lack of progress as a player. And it's almost like a lesson to everybody. Be like, not all players get better. Some players peak at 22. Some players peak at 27. It just is what it is. And we shouldn't always assume that these guys will continue to add tools to their game.
Yeah, and kind of moving away from the Ben Simmons conversation, but kind of just
to, we have to.
I mean, I think at least...
I'm good, Soaps. I'm just watching chat and enjoying Jake and King and Dieter. Sorry, Dieter.
Yeah, but just kind of moving into the other portion of it, and obviously you brought it up near the end there, of, seeing a situation of, and I know this conversation has come up in the Discord, and I wanted to get your opinion on it, how much of this loss falls on Doc?
Oh, a large part. I think you have to say 50%, and that's reasonable as a coach. I mean, there were situations in this series. Again, you're working with someone who is hurt, and your best player in Joel Embiid. So you're already trying to maximize what you can get out of a player who is playing hampered. He's not 100% for you, but he's giving you everything you can possibly expect out of a star. So you have to appreciate that. Daryl Morey did a lot for this team in changing the pieces, swindling the Mavericks to get Seth Curry, best Curry, for that bum Josh Richardson was a great move. Paul Reed, I love him. I just want to ask Paul Reed out there. But like this roster as a whole was good, but was lacking that it factor. Jimmy Butler was that guy for the Sixers when they were closest to a championship. And Ben Simmons, again, new things that came out, was unhappy that he was being basically yoinked out of the starting point guard position for Jimmy Butler. Rightfully so, for the Sixers to try to win in that Eastern Conference Finals. And that was part of the decision of why Jimmy Butler was done with the 76ers. Basically, from the front office, was Ben was unhappy, so clearly we need to move on. So I would say 50% Doc Rivers for his coaching decisions, but there's only so much you can do when you have when your supposed second best player is unwilling to improve his own game. If he's not putting in the work, if he's not actively trying to win games, I'm sorry, I don't know what more you can do. I mean, Doc Rivers blowing leads is what he does, but man, it feels wrong to blame him for the situation because his second best player basically is just a coward.
Yeah, and I know in the Discord earlier, like I kind of voiced my opinion on it. Like I think it goes 85% is on Ben because Ben's not able to step up. I put about 8% on Doc. And basically, I did that mostly just because it's like
8
at times
or 80.
Yeah, 8.
Oh wow,
like,
okay.
Yeah, like I think primarily this series is on Ben. I put 8% on Doc because of the fact of like there were times where it's like you need to make adjustments, you need to find something else that works.
Yeah.
Because at times it felt like he was reluctant to go to Shake or to go to Maxey when they needed it.
Yes.
Like it felt like there were times he was super reluctant to do that, and he was being too loyal to allow Ben to stay in. Like obviously he started making the smart idea of like, hey, at this time Ben cannot be in the fucking game.
Yeah,
like
very telling in the final minutes of the Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals that you have to bench your starting point guard who's going to be earning $30 million because he's a liability. I mean, yeah. I think that I give him credit for doing that because I think a lot of coaches would have a problem with that, but was it too little too late? I think is a fair question.
Yeah, and just the fact of like there were times where like people were not hitting anything, and he just kept running them out there, of where it almost was like, and obviously once again, Embiid was hobbled in this series, and he was playing on a meniscus injury, which shout outs to Embiid because a lot of players would not have done that. Obviously, like it wasn't an insanely bad tear, but like it was one that like doctors told him like, hey, like you could play on it. We probably don't recommend it.
Yeah.
Especially with the problems you have with your leg, like it's probably not going to be too good. But he basically was like, I want to do this for the city, but you just see at times of where it's, like you see moments of where like Seth Curry and Embiid are dropping 30 points. You look at Tobias, and then Tobias at times is kind of just choking. He's missing easy layups, and Tobias being that guy that like for this team was like one of the go-to scorers, and he's not hitting things that he should be. Obviously, don't get me wrong. At times, like he was kind of being defended by a Kunglu who's really stepped into his own. But like the fact of, it just feels like it. Just at times of where like Doc didn't seem like he was drawing up like the right sets to get someone like that going. Where it almost felt like in Game 7, it was basically Embiid and Seth versus the Hawks. And Tobias just kind of benefited from the fact that they had to actually play defense on them, and then they ran into Rick Ashley, aka Kevin Huerter.
Okay.
He looks like him, dude. I've seen at least 3 things that people put him in the fucking Rick roll.
Fucking be easy on Velvet Thunder over there, okay? I have mad respect for Huerter and what he's done. I agree, though. Like, it's an interesting dynamic to look at the makeup of the Sixers and go, how should this team function? Like we're talking about the best seed in the East and the struggles they're facing. And I agree with you, though. Joel Embiid, the respect for him has gone up. I remember Jake posted in Discord right at the beginning of the playoffs about his injury and being like, man, Like, I hope that I'm so happy to hear that he will be playing because his legacy cannot be one of the most dominant players to never be healthy when it matters. Like, I want to see his playoff game speak for itself instead of being the guy who, had the shits basically, had sit out playoff games, was just always unhealthy. Like, that was a story of Joel Embiid at the time. So I was thrilled to see him play through this, but you're right. Like Tobias Harris, and here's the weird thing. I want to ask you because I'm kind of like cross seriesing this reference, but did they think Tobias Harris was their Chris Middleton? And that's a lot to ask out of him. I think at one point. And then the second question I have for you is Seth Curry, even though he is best Curry, man, they were hunting him down. They were absolutely abusing him on the defensive end, and I think that as much good as he did for them, I mean, it also burned them back pretty bad. I mean, Ben is the problem, and I will never, overlook that. But I do want to move past that almost as far as this roster and say, like, how did the Hawks beat them other than their hilarious amounts of depth, which paid off massive dividends in the series? But like, when you look at Toby and you look at Seth Curry, like, are these really number 2 and 3 pieces on a team that you expect to be in the Eastern Conference Finals or even the finals of the NBA?
Yeah, and I kind of look at it, and it's just if they're expecting Tobias to be like a Chris Middleton type player, you chose the wrong player to be that. And like this thing, I love Tobias.
Yeah,
I always will look back on that Blake Griffin Tobias trade and not feel happy because I did like Tobias a lot.
yep.
But
I did too. He started off the year like fire hot, and I fucking was a believer in Tobias Harris. But these playoffs showed like he's on that Jeremy Grant level. He is a 3rd or 4th option best kind of guy if your team is doing good.
Yeah, and it's just looking at the fact that like your 2nd and 3rd best player are making about $30 million a year, and the fact of like, obviously I'm not going to bash Ben. Like
no. Go ahead. We are digging deep here.
The fact that Ben's not even the 2nd best player on this team, he's like the 4th.
Well, is he? Like, we're making such a big deal out of his offensive game's deficiencies. Can you have a 2nd best player, a la Rudy Gobert, you had mentioned earlier, who offensively is limited? Like, can you have a defensive superstar and call him your 2nd best player? Or is this a situation where the NBA has changed and like, that's great. You know what the best defensive player is on a championship team? So Dennis fucking Rodman. That's Draymond Green. That's a guy who is like 4th or 5th on the prime, priority list for you. Like, if he is your 2nd best player and he is that limited, is he really your 2nd best player?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going with when I said like I don't even think he's their 2nd best player. Of the fact of like, to me, like obviously like the league is predicated towards offense, especially when you are facing a team like the Hawks. You cannot have an off night on offense. In fact, obviously, they locked into the fact that Trae Young was ice cold for 90% of the game, and they still fucking lost.
Yeah,
like it's the fact that like the fact that Bogdan was not playing healthy. The fact that Gallo at times was not playing very good. Yep. And into Velvet Thunder and his MJ and Kobe impression for like the whole game.
He was feeling it. He was feeling it.
Yeah,
but they were giving him the looks. That's the thing. Like, yeah.
But I think it's just I looked at it and it was like, he's so far down in the priority that I'm like, it pains me to say 2nd best because like I think talent wise he is the 2nd best. Yeah. Ben has another level he can go to. It's just the fact of it's somewhere in there and he's just not able to bring it out. But like talent wise, I think he's the 2nd best. But like in reality, he's more like the 4th. Like, at least when I was looking at it, because it's like, fuck, when Max used the game, he looked like he was more higher priority at times. Yeah. Of where it just kind of... I want to say you can have a defensive player be your 2nd best. Because I think, like, with a Rudy Gobert. Sorry, there's too many Rudys.
No! Not Rudy, yay!
Yeah, but, like, with Rudy Gobert, I think you can get away with him being your 2nd best
Yeah.
Because the fact that you can pair people who hide his offensive woes.
First best, by the way. Rudy Gobert is the best player on the fucking Utah Jazz. I will fight anybody that says otherwise. Donovan Mitchell is number 2.
All right. Yeah. You know what I mean, though. If Rudy Gobert, some people consider Rudy Gobert the second.
But it's the roster construction.
Think...
it's the construction of the roster around that. And that's what I think the Jazz did a phenomenal job of getting incredible scorers and spacing around someone who will shut down the paint defensively, shut down the rim protection. That is gold star territory for that's how you make a fucking team, Utah. Great job. Not everything came together at the right time. You had injuries. Everything is understandable. I don't blame them for a damn thing. But you look at the Sixers and you go, the fuck is that? Who the fuck thought that would work? We have knockoff Draymond Green as our second best player.
Yeah, and I think it's just going into the offseason, especially the draft, because we'll get into the draft in a little bit.
Yes.
They really do need to look for some perimeter creation because, there's at times where it's the identity of this team's offense is so weird to me. Because it's obviously Embiid's number one priority, easy peasy. Yeah, it's not even a fucking discussion. Anyone who thinks it should be anything otherwise doesn't watch this team.
Yep.
But, then you get to the weird mixture of, Tobias seems to want to operate a lot of the time, and this is obviously just from what I've seen. I will admit, I have not watched an absolute load of Sixers games this year. But there's times where, Toby looks like he's trying to operate in the mid-range, where it's okay, understandable. You're kind of stepping into Embiid's, territory a little bit, especially because at times, he's on the same side of Embiid, and it's Toby, I don't know what you're doing here.
Yep.
And you have Seth Curry running around in the 3, and then, the other person on the court, God only knows where they're going to be half the time. Where it's it feels like this, their offense had no identity. It was essentially just it's the Embiid and everyone else show.
Yeah, that's fair criticism. And I think that Toby's game at times is helpful, but I agree when he's on the floor with Embiid at the same time, you do often see them kind of conflict as far as spacing it goes in the court. And it doesn't seem complimentary. It very much the sets they run for each other. I don't agree with them, and I don't have the sets in front of me. But I remember reading about them not being ideal for the Sixers and how they run their offense. So, when I look at that situation, if you ask me, would you rather have Tobias Harris or DeMar DeRozan? I think DeMar DeRozan on this team, if you could pull a sign and trade for Toby. I know this is getting into the off-season talks. I don't know if we're quite there, but that's a player who I think that if you could direct swap, a sign and trade DeMar DeRozan for Toby, yeah, a lot of people might question that. I think that's a phenomenal fucking job. It's you need to make the call at some point or another that we're building a roster around Joel Embiid, and that's our best player, and that's how we have to win a championship. And if you don't do that, if you don't fully commit, you're not going to win, And I think that's the frustrating part is the pieces around him aren't there to win. And I love that Dieter brings up the turnovers. And that is 8 turnovers in 2 consecutive games for Joel Embiid. And that's a sign that he is being asked, or he feels like he has to carry that much of the burden of the offense, because when he is doubled, there's no good answer. There's not that outlet guy who should be getting a great look for him. There's not the movement on the offense. So I think about that and I go, yeah, this team needs to make a lot of moves this offseason if they think they're in a championship window around Joel Embiid, which who wouldn't think that, because he was a MVP candidate and he's only basically disqualified because of his games. He's someone who is a dominant force, the likes we haven't seen in years. So this offseason is kind of the ultimate point for the Sixers franchise moving forward, because it's do you move along with Joel Embiid as your championship centerpiece? Do you think that Ben Simmons still has growth? Do you think that you have to sell on Ben Simmons to move on and fit, will you make the moves? And I think that Daryl Morey is kind of a guy who is willing to roll the dice around the best pieces of his franchise. That's one thing he's shown us.
Yeah, and to kind of get into the offseason moves as well, because that is kind of something that we were going to touch on a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to probably touch on it too much. Obviously, Danny Green is a name that is a free agent for them. I guess I'll just ask, do you think that they bring Danny Green back? Like, I know Doc has the quote, I believe, of, like, you're not going anywhere.
He's a great locker room guy. He'll give you minutes. He's a good defender. You know, you'll have your Danny Green nights, you'll have your Danny Red nights, depending on how his shooting's going. It depends on what the number is. You know, honestly, like, I don't think he's probably going anywhere. I think that like, if Doc's saying he's staying, he probably is going to stay. But it really comes down to that number. What is he worth to you as a plus defender, but not necessarily a plus offensive player on the court, you know?
Yeah, and I think almost at this point of where, you know, if you are going to move on from Ben, because we'll probably run with the assumption that Ben is still on this team by the time the season starts. I don't know if he gets moved in the offseason, but, you know, in free agency, do you target a playmaking guard? The fact that, like, you need someone to fill that role, and then a random name that I always think of, because I remember we had this conversation in the Discord before, I think it was with the Jazz.
Yeah.
Of, like, they need, basically, of needing a playmaking point guard. However, I was like, the only problem is a lot of the point guards or just guards in this free agency aren't playmakers, they're scorers. I'm like, really, the only playmakers are, like, Ish Smith, which if Ish is your starter, good luck.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it was, like TJ McConnell was the other one I brought up. Like, do you reunite TJ? But even to that, is TJ good enough to be your starter? Like, as much as I know Jake loves TJ McConnell, like,
TJ is not a championship level guard. He's a great bench guard, and he is probably a phenomenal starting guard on a mid-level team. You know, I'm going to compete for playoffs, but there's no championship shot. I'm sorry, I love TJ, but no. You know, Lowry was the name that has been thrown around the most because mid-season there was the instant connection of Kyle Lowry, bring him home to Philly. He is someone who they have a big love for, but the asking price was too high. Well, now it raises the question. Is this sign and trade for $20 million a year for Lowry on a contract? Is he going to get more than that in the open market? You know, Ben Simmons, the assumption that he won't get moved, I don't know if that's true. You know, Ben Simmons, CJ McCollum names are being fucking tied together very tight. And it's funny because if you asked me before the playoffs, Ben Simmons rating up here, CJ McCollum here, and all of a sudden, Ben's down here with CJ. A lot of people are starting to ask that question, like, how do we get to the point where we put the right pieces around him? And CJ's a better fit than Ben in theory. And then we get to see what CJ can do without another guard in the backcourt who's taking all the possessions. He might have an ego. I love to see CJ unleashed. Like, I think Lowry, CJ are the two targets. DeMar DeRozan's the one I personally think would be a great fit for them. Purely on the wing. I love the idea of a sign and trade with DeRozan. I don't know what his free market value is, but I think Toby out there for him would be an interesting toss-out option. Ben, maybe not necessarily so, but yeah. I think there's a lot of great names out there, but this is very much, it feels like we're hitting the desperation switch. Like the button, you're just kind of like, fuck, we're a playoff team. We got to win because Joel Embiid might not have 3 healthy years left in his career.
Yeah, and so moving into the draft, obviously, you know, they're a playoff team. They made the second round.
Yes,
you know,
they did.
They're going to have a later pick. Let me pull up Tankathon so I can make sure I actually say their correct pick.
Tankathon just updated 1 day ago, by the way. For all those who follow along at home, Tankathon is the best site for hitting the sim button on the lottery for the next 24 hours. Get your hopes up now.
I mean, yeah. Also, because I'm going to point this out, Dave, this was a little nitpick I got. Why of all days, on a Friday, did the Celtics and Thunder decide to do that trade? Because the absolute bullshit. That's the day my mock went live.
Okay.
So I look like the goofball.
That does hurt, and you do have to put a disclaimer in the video instantly, because otherwise people
don't worry, there was what are
you? I hate people like that.
Yeah, we already had to put another disclaimer in there because there was a draft pick situation. And if the Thunder get the 4 and a 5, they don't get the 18th.
Yep, it's true.
And we didn't factor that in. So
Oh,
they had
okay.
3 picks in mind.
Yeah, it's not quite right.
Yeah. But the Sixers have the 28th pick. And I guess, obviously, this is the team that I personally don't think really needs more rookies. They kind of already got their last batch of them. But, if they were to take with this pick, if a Deshaun Highland is here, did they take him in a heartbeat?
No. No. What? Wait. What pick number are we at?
28.
No. Highland. Okay, I know you're very high on him. And I'm interested, but there are a lot of moves that they're making this offseason. If we're saying we're going for a guard to run an offense and need scoring and maybe some defense, to be fair, I'm gonna be a homer. I'm gonna sign with that kid Ricky over there and say there's someone who's in Illinois who would be a fantastic fit in Io DeSumo. I think that he's probably the guard who would go in the late 20s to the 76ers. I think he's someone who could come in. Maybe he's too similar to Maxi, but he is a little bit older. Physically built though, like he's a step ahead of the game in that respect. So I think he could come in, play well, and help them from the guard position. But yeah, like honestly, this is a weird situation for the Sixers. If they keep this pick, like you said, I like Io.
Yeah, and the main reason I was throwing Highland out is just because God only knows what the fuck they're going to get for Ben. I was just kind of looking at it as like they need like perimeter creation, and basically Highland is essentially like Jamal Crawford, and he's gonna get his own from the 3. He doesn't really need people to set him up. That's why I was kind of saying like that's why I would lean that direction for them. But like let's say in the offseason, they somehow managed to get CJ without trading this pick.
Yep.
Could they be a team? And let's say I was off the board by this point. Because there is a chance he's gone by this pick. Because I think in mine I have him gone by this pick. I think I'd have to look through my mock again. I haven't checked this since the video went live. But just are there any guards in like the second round you think that they may take a swing on, or could they even be a team that if a Trey Murphy the third's here, just be like, all right, fuck it, just get a 3-and-D guy to replace Danny Green if you don't want to bring him back.
Yeah, I mean the idea of getting someone who could help out there would be great for them. I just don't see. Again, it's like okay, if they get a CJ deal done, where do they go? If they get a deal, Toby out of town for DeMar in a sign and trade, where would that put them? Like honestly, like their prio list should be like you said, creating point guard, someone who can score at the 3 level. And then also defense is a plus. I don't think it's necessary. Like, if a Cooper falls, fucking jump on it, boys. Absolutely jump on it. But same time, Io would be great there, but like I look at this team and I'm like, I mean, honestly, if you told me that like Deshaun Nix or Josh Christopher maybe fell on your boards. I don't know where your respective is. Like, if those guys were available, like, I think I would look at both of those guys very interested. I think that both of them could contribute. And I know the default answer is take the upperclassmen. You're a championship window team. Maybe look at a McBride, maybe look at an Ishan Highland as the upperclassmen who would help you out far more than these younger players. But I don't know. I think this is a team that has a window still. I think that this, and again, it's really 100% on Joel Embiid's health, but I feel like selling short on upside for a done player, like if they took a Joel Ayayi, I would be disappointed. And I mean that in the nicest possible way to him. I think he's a great player. I think he was a phenomenal college player. But he's a bench point guard in the NBA at best. He's not a star. He's not someone who's going to change a franchise. He's not someone who will flip a series in the playoffs with his play. Trey Mann's someone who interests me, but I'm not sold quite yet on what he is at the NBA level. So, like, same reason. Yeah, like I want somewhat of a known prospect, but at the same time, like, I'm not taking a done deal kind of kid, that there's that weird window of like he's helpful now, but also there is room to grow. There is room.
Yeah, and like I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. My brain was like, oh yeah, we're gonna start this off, and now of course it's like, oh no, it's like sit back down, we ain't talking. Just kind of looking through some of the names as well. Obviously, Tankathon did update. So, F's in the chat to know I look like a fucking idiot because Isaiah Jackson plummeted.
He did, but yeah.
But just kind of in a situation where they looking for a guard. Could they be a team to look at Rokas Jokubaitis? Or Jokubaitis, I don't remember how to say his name.
Yeah.
Could they be a team to potentially look at him?
No.
Kind of.
I feel fairly confident saying the idea of a European player coming over to this team scares too many NBA scouts as someone who could contribute early in his career. And I think that's ridiculous, but it is what it is, and I have to accept the reality that the NBA views European players as a high-risk pick, regardless of what their position is, what they've proven overseas, and what their track record is. So I don't see a team going after Rokas earlier in the draft. We're talking 28. I don't think that they believe that he would be someone who could come over year one and help them win a championship in the next 2 years. That's my fear. Does he have that talent? I believe he potentially does. I have him, above 28 on my big board. I think he is better than the 20th best prospect on the board, but will he be able to help you year 2, year 3, year 4? Potentially as your final year of a championship window around Joel Embiid. That's what you have to look at. I think that window is too short for someone like Rokas. So I fear that would not be someone they are going to take a deep dive on. The same thing like BJ Boston and his potential spacing could be great. He could be a phenomenal wing for someone in the NBA. There's not a fucking chance in hell the 76ers would take a look at him because, he ain't going to help us next year. Ain't going to help us the year after that. Doesn't fucking matter after that. You are drafting for your very specific window at this point in time because of your contracts available. So you're almost ignoring potentially better prospects, higher upside prospects to go after these guys who are they're pretty good okay now, and they could get better, but it will happen pretty quickly. We expect them to, Terrence Shannon is someone who, bench player on Texas Tech, kind of seemed like a little bit of a do-it-all kind of player. He and Josh Christopher are very much in the same phrasing a lot of the time. I like Christopher better. Some people like Shannon better, but basically a bench guard who can do a little bit of ball handling, a little bit of defense, a little bit of scoring, kind of master of all, or good at all, master of none. I think that's the phrasing there. I think he could be interesting. I don't know that they're sold on Furkan, and that's why I bring him up. But yeah, I feel like this is a situation where they're forcing themselves into if they don't get top point guards in the draft, you are looking at Trey Man, you are looking at Io, you are looking at someone like Dacian, or you mentioned Nishan Bones, but it feels like they're going to get desperate. Miles McBride's someone who overlooked because of his size, but I'm almost talking myself into moving him up my draft board. The more I look at everyone, he is short, but at the same time, he is very good. I don't know. I think he's someone who could impact the league day one and get his,
Yeah. And just for the final thing, are there any other players you think that they may go after? Actually, even positions that we haven't really talked about. Could they go for a backup forward? Could they go for a backup 4 even? Or is it basically, are we just viewing it as they are going for a guard and that's it?
No, it's fair to question other positions on the Sixers. I think at the end of the day, so much depends on free agency, which kind of happens in parallel with the draft, it's technically available now, as we've already seen the Kemba Walker trade. I'm sorry, Kemba Walker trade. But it will happen before the draft, after the draft. It comes down to if they make that move. If Toby's on the team, if Ben is on the team. I really don't believe, I agree with Chat in this one, that they will not return Joe, Ben, and Toby as their big three. It feels like one of those three pieces, not Joel Embiid, obviously, is going to be moved on from. So if they need to land themselves like, hey, we are cool, like, very different situation in the draft, but the Phoenix Suns taking Cam at, what was that, 11 or 14? Hey, we're good with a role player, and we don't give a fuck about upside. We're like, this is like, all right, put him in right now. And the next decade, he's a 3-and-D wing for us. Like, that could be their Trey Murphy. That could be their Livers. That could be someone like a Matthew Hurt even for them. And I think they would be okay with that. It's weird to say it out loud because taking someone who a lot of people want to put a cap on and be like, that's just who they are. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but there's also nothing saying that that's what they're maxing out at, as. There's nothing out there saying that Trey Murphy can't add a dribble pull-up to his game or something like that. Like, yes, he excels right now at what he's been asked to do. He's been playing at Virginia for a couple of years, so, that's kind of his niche on that team, but let's not say that he can't grow as a player. So I could see them do that. They do have a second rounder of this draft, but I'm almost in favor of like, hey, let's start packaging and moving it. Plus Ben Simmons or Toby to get where we need to be with a player who can help us win a championship. If that's my question to you, do you think the Sixers make a pick in the first round, or do you think it's packaged towards a trade?
I think it should be packaged towards a trade. The only thing is, like, it always falls into that weird, like they may have something planned down the line. Like, I don't know. I wish they would trade this pick, and that's, like, I do want to specify, I am not a 76ers hater. Yep. I mostly am just doing this because I want to take a victory lap against Jake, because my team's been the butt of the joke all year.
I fucking love your Pistons, man. Love that team.
Hey, it's always fun when we get robbed of the first pick. But
y'all about to get JG4, be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, basically,
don't fuck that up, by the way.
We'll find a way. We have Troy Weaver. We'll find some fucking exceptional piece.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but just kind of with this, I want them to package it because the fact I think you do need to make a change to this roster. I don't think you need to add more young guys because you have that backlog already of, like, you have Isaiah Joe waiting for his opportunity. You have B-Ball Paul waiting. Sure. You have Maxey who's waiting, like, for his full, like, entrance into the lineup. Like, essentially, I think with that draft, like, I would just look at this one and be like, yeah, there's a lot of, like, people who have potential to be good role players. We already have 3 of them waiting.
Yep.
Obviously, Maxey already has gotten his chance to shine, but, like, he's also doing it next to Shake Milton, and him and Shake are, like, the same player.
They do have some similarities, yeah.
Yeah, like, I think if I'm the 76ers, I'm maybe reluctantly, but I'd be like, fuck it, we need, like, some change. So I would be willing to move this pick.
Yeah.
All right. Any last things about the draft segment?
No, I'm excited to see what happens because I think that the 76ers are one of those teams where, like you said, it's almost in their best interest to make a draft day deal to move on from one of their key pieces plus this draft pick to get where they need to be to compete for a championship. And if they don't, if they walk away from this draft with, like, Johnny Juzang or, some I don't want to say shit because I think that Juzang could be good, but, like, a BJ Boston, a high level, like, developmental person, that would raise so many questions for me as far as the direction of the organization. And this will be, like, the first time where, like, we really get a full offseason of, like, okay, we hit our cap. This is where we're at as a team. Daryl Morey made his moves the first year, and we saw what happened. What can he spin this next offseason to get us over the hump?
Yeah. All right. That's going to end the show for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Obviously, we just run through Housekeeping 1 last time before we end the show. Go to the description box below there. You can find the Discord link there. You can continue the conversation about the draft. Do you think they should draft someone? You can let us know there. You can also let us know in the YouTube comments below. If you want to support us at a monetary value, go to patreon.com/MVPvids. There, you are able to, like the benefits I said earlier. Or, you can even skip that, and I forgot this part before. You can be a channel member. You get the same benefits as Patreon. Obviously, it's just this time you don't have to go through Patreon. Because, for instance, if you have the same issues I have, the Patreon, for some reason my bank will not let me pay through my credit card. I have to go the roundabout way. Like, the fucking absolute roundabout way that I have to pay through PayPal because my bank is like, Patreon's scary. No. But, if you don't want to have to do that and you want to just pay through YouTube, you can do that as well. Patreon members, or not Patreon members, YouTube members get the exact same things as Patreon. It's just another way of being able to do it. As well, we do have prospect videos coming out soon. I don't remember exactly when Ricky's Iota Sumo one comes out, if it hasn't already come out. I think it's coming up very soon, though. And obviously, then there's the one waiting in the wings. I still haven't gotten to record mine just yet. But it is on the way. I do have it written. I got everything written down. I just need to get around to recording it. And as well, I didn't forget about it. We got some tweets to show.
Oh? We got some. Oh yeah, I have to call it out. Jake required me to say he was right on the expectations for the Sixers this year. That was from Discord earlier today. But we got some tweets to show, which may say otherwise.
Yeah. So basically, Jake is a very well-known Sixers fan in our Discord, and he's a little bit of a Ben defender. For most of the year he's been giving Ben passes for being a role player. And we took I got some screenshots of the tweets.
Oh no, we got receipts.
Yeah, and it makes me feel real happy seeing Ben Simmons defenders having tweets saying the process didn't fail. Ben Simmons did as well. Right after the game,
we will begin shortly. We're getting to fix technical difficulties here.
Yeah, he wasn't ready for the tweets. He wasn't ready for the receipts to come out.
Yeah. We're working on it. Also, I don't think I've ever seen Sixers as singular. I'm like, I just read the bottom line, like, Sixer draft. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
The process didn't fail. Ben Simmons did, and my favorite line I think I've ever heard Jake say on Twitter. Right, Ben Simmons. Never thought in my life I'd be in a situation that I get to hear Ben say that, or hear Ben get traded. But 76er fan said it himself. Have a good day, everyone.
He's a massive Sixer fan too. That's gotta hurt.
Oh yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Hopefully your team doesn't fuck this up, Jake.